Your cybersecurity solution is here. Introducing Pentester's Advanced Cybersecurity Suite. Ready for peace of mind? Try it for free. No credit card required. Pentester.com.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anthony Ruggiano Jr. I want to welcome everybody to Reform Gangsters. And if you like my content, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. Also, check out my Patreon. I got a lot of new content on there and a lot of content on its way. And I also have a store. Check out my merch. Maybe you want to purchase something, a little memento. I want to welcome everybody in. I want to say, hope everybody had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I already addressed Christmas in the mob. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about New Year's in the mob and how we celebrated New Year's. My parents, were always out on New Year's Eve when I was little. So I celebrated New Year's Eve when I was a little kid with my grandparents. And it was totally different than when I became an adult. I didn't know where my parents went. I just knew they went out on New Year's Eve. But as I got older and I became a member of the mob and I started working with my own man and Tony Lee and everybody, we never went out of the neighborhood because my father and Tony used to call it amateur night because all the amateurs are out drinking. And we never went to strange places on New Year's Eve. We always had parties. We always owned bars. We always owned something, and we always had parties, and everybody would come. And it was the same like Christmas Eve. We would start out in the afternoon. We'd go to the club or the bar, wherever we were hanging out, and we would meet there. And then we would go to the Raven Night, the same as Christmas Eve. We would go to the Raven Night on New Year's Eve, and we'd have a party at the Raven Night, and everybody would be there. And it was just like I said in earlier videos, when O'Neill had the Raven Night, it was one way, and when John had the Raven Night, it was another way. I didn't go to the Raven Night on New Year's Eve when John became the boss. I would see John on 101st Avenue. So there was no need for me to go to the Raven Night. And I really didn't like to go to the Raven Night when John was the boss because it was a different atmosphere than when O'Neill had it, but when O'Neill had it, it was the same festive day. We'd go to the Raven Night. We'd have they'd have a spread of food. We would drink. We would laugh, play pinochle. A lot of guys would show up. Like Buddy was there, and I was there, and I would take a couple of my friends there. I just have to excuse me. I have a sinus infection, so if I cough during the broadcast, excuse me. So it was the same atmosphere as Christmas Eve. I love New Year's Eve. I'm at the Raven Night, and then we would go back to the neighborhood, and we would go back to the club or the bar, and then later on we would have a big party. We'd have entertainment. And it was packed. Everybody, the whole crew was there. Everybody was there, and everybody would come with their wives and their girlfriends. And then it's funny because we would all drink, and then at 12 o'clock. Everybody would, scream, Happy New Year, kiss everybody and everything. And it was funny because then we would all start bringing our wives and girlfriends home and everybody would drift back. And then about 2 a.m, it was all guys. You know what I mean? And that happened year after year after year, and that's just how it was after midnight. And sometimes people would come after midnight, guys that stood home with their families. After midnight would show up. So it was an all-night party, but very intimate, always in the neighborhood. We never went out of the neighborhood. We never went to strange places. We didn't allow strangers into the bars we owned. We would lock the doors. Only people we knew were allowed in. Never any trouble. Just a really festive night and a lot of wise guys. And it's funny because you got all these gangsters and everybody's laughing and partying, and it was just like a normal thing, for abnormal people. Yeah.
So what's going on when the guys come back? Is it cards? Is it cigars? Is it drinking?
No, nothing. Just everybody drinking and laughing and bullshit and gossiping. Just hanging out. Just fellowshipping. You know what I mean? Like nothing. No, no card playing or anything like that. It was so when I first started doing it, my father and Tony Lee owned this bar called Bulldogs. That was in City Line in Brooklyn. It was a big bar. It had a big round bar and a big dance floor. We had a disco ball in there and everything. We had a kitchen. It was tremendous. It was right on Liberty Avenue in City Line. So we would have our Christmas parties in there. Most of the time. When that bar closed, we stood it. They opened up Cafe Liberty. So we would have parties in there or this other place called the Red Den on Atlantic Avenue. Then when we took over the Polish National Hall, which was in Ozone Park, where I hung out, they had a big room upstairs in the bar, and we would have the New Year's Eve parties up there. And we made it. It's funny because, the mob and the Catholic Church always are intertwined with each other, because of the feast. So up the block from the Polish National Hall was a Catholic school and church called St. Stanislav's. And we made a deal with the church. You got to excuse me. I'm not feeling well. We made a deal with the church to park cars there. And we paid them. We gave them a donation. We didn't pay them. We gave them a donation to park cars there. And we had a whole thing. We had valet parkers. We had kids from the neighborhood that were valet parking cars. And it was just a really good night. We had it down pat. Those parties were really good at the Polish National. I had entertainment. Jay Black from Janie Americas would get us a group to come and play. It was just a good time.
But it was good, clean fun, like family fun until just the guys.
All good, clean fun. Yeah.
And who did you watch on TV? Did you watch the ball drop?
Well, when we were kids, we watched Guy Lombardo, of course. That was the big thing before Dick Clark was Guy Lombardo. That's really, only old timers remember that. You know what I mean? The Guy Lombardo band. But I used to watch that with my grandmother. May all acquaintance be forgotten. You know what I mean? At midnight.
And your mom bring you up on Santa Claus?
Yeah, that's a good story. So my mother used to take us every year to see Santa Claus. We used to go to Gertz in Jamaica. That was a big thing. They had the Enchanted Forest and Santa Claus. We would go there every year to Gertz in Jamaica. We'd take the Q8 bus down to Jamaica, and we used to go to Gertz, and we used to take pictures with Santa Claus. They never disillusioned us with Santa Claus. Like we used to go get our Christmas trees, me and my father and my brother. That was like a tradition. We used to go with the three of us used to go to get our Christmas trees. And I always enjoyed that. I remember it was always cold and snowy. I didn't know that the guys that ran the Christmas trees were my own man. I was a kid, and we used to go there and they would like cater to him, and it was just a nice night, just the three of us. We never took my sister. He just took me and my brother. And then we go home and he'd set the tree up, and on a Christmas Eve, we decorated like a family. But we all believed in Santa Claus. My mother would hang the stocking on the side of the bed and fill it up with all, candies and stuff. And I would wake up in the morning and, my stocking would be full of candies and chocolate Santa Clauses and all that. And we always got nice things, as we got older. My brother and I always got like some kind of sports thing. Like on Christmas, we would get like a new baseball glove or a basketball or a new football or cleats or, like always something sports related. As we got older, my brother and I would always get something sports related because my father was, had us into sports. That's one thing about, he was a gangster, but he loved sports. He would teach us how to box and play catch with us and all that. So he would always buy us some kind of sports thing on Christmas. We would always get that. But how I stopped believing in Santa Claus was, so we went, we would eat dinner on Christmas Eve and everything, all the fish and all that, and then we'd go to bed and I don't know, I must have been about 7 or 8. I don't know how old I was. And all I know is I remember I woke up and I heard my mother and father arguing over something. And I got up and I went by my door and I looked into the living room and they were arguing over how to put something together. And they didn't know I was looking, and I looked and I saw, and it was something that we asked Santa Claus to bring us. And then I was in shock, honestly. It was kind of traumatic, you know what I mean? And I said, and I went and I laid back in bed and I said, oh shit, there's no Santa Claus. I was kind of like fucked up, you know what I mean? But I didn't say nothing, you know, I didn't say nothing. I didn't tell my brother, you know, he still believed in Santa Claus, and my sister. But I was kind of traumatized, you know what I mean? Like they were arguing over putting together a toy that Santa Claus was supposed to bring. And that's how I found out there was no Santa Claus, you know? Yeah, it was a very traumatic event.
Did you leave
So
out?
Fat Andy was Santa Claus. Yeah.
Did you leave out cookies and milk?
No, we didn't do that. We didn't do that. And I only went to church with my grandmother. My parents never went to church. My grandmother used to take me to church for Christmas. My grandmother always took me every Christmas to Manhattan. We would go to radio, because back in the 60s, the 50s and 60s, it was different than it is today. Today in Radio City, they have just a Christmas show, and that's it. You know what I mean? When I was a little kid, Disney, every Christmas premiered a movie in Radio City Music Hall. It was like a tradition. So every year, a Disney movie would be premiered at Radio City Music Hall at Christmas time. It was part of the Christmas show. So my grandmother would always take me to Radio City, and we would watch it was just the Rockettes, the stable scene with all the animals, and they would do the stable scene, and we watched the Rockettes, and then we watch a Disney movie, and we did that every year. The Son of Flubber, the Shaggy Dog, Bambi. I saw everything in Radio City, and she used to bring. My uncle had a canteen from the Navy, a metal canteen. She used to fill it up with milk, and she used to make cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. And when the lights went out in Radio City, we would eat lunch. Yeah, that's what we did. Yeah, or we'd go to the automat. For those of you who remember what automats were, we used to go to Horn and Harding's automat. And then, of course, we used to go to see the tree. We used to go to Rockefeller Center, look at the people ice skating, go to St. Patrick's Cathedral, just Tom and I. We used to do that every year.
Going back to the wise guys, around Christmas time, did people kick up extra to like John and the guys, or no?
Well, that's a good question, because so Christmas Eve, we would meet before the Raven Night, and guys would come, and my old man and Tony would get all envelopes. They used to get, like, I remember one Christmas they got 18,000 in envelopes. Another Christmas they got over 20,000, and guys would come, their crew guys, and give them envelopes, Christmas presents. And some guys that were with them would only come once a year. Like, I didn't even, like, there was this guy, Tony Royal, he owned a car lot. He used to come on Christmas Eve and give them an envelope. So there was guys that used to only come once a year on Christmas that would give them a big Christmas envelope that were with them, and then they would, I remember in Boldocks, the bar, when I first started hanging out with them, Christmas Eve, they would collect all these envelopes, and then they would go in the back room. The kitchen was all the way in the back. Tony Lee and my old man Fat Andy would go in the back, and they'd open up all the envelopes, and they would take a piece out and put it in another envelope, and then they would split the money in half, and the envelope that they made up, they would bring that to the Ravenite and give it to Neil. So that's how that worked. But they always made a nice piece of change on Christmas Eve.
In their glory days, how many guys are kicking up to your dad and Tony Lee?
On Christmas? Oh my God. Over 50 guys. Well over 50 guys. It was packed. The Boldocks was packed. before we left to go to the Raven Night, because not everybody went to the Raven Night. Only a select few were allowed to go to the Raven Night. I mean, like there might be 100 people in Bulldogs, but only 10 of us would go to the Raven Night, if that many. You know what I mean? So it was very select few that were allowed to go to the Raven Night. We didn't take everybody to the Raven Night, you know. So yeah, well over 50 guys.
And what was New Year's Day like? Were you in the betting hall and taking numbers, or
New Year's Day was like, we used to stay out all night into the next day and then just go home and eat and go to sleep. You know, yeah. You know, we didn't, it was just a big party.
And then to wrap it up, talk to us about the difference of using versus being sober on New Year's Eve. This is a difficult time for many people.
Well, you know, for people that are using, people are under the impression when they're caught up in that addiction, they're under the impression that if they're clean or sober, you can't have fun. And that's the illusion of using. That what am I going to do now? Am I going to enjoy this? How am I going to enjoy that? You know, like, and that's the lie. That's the lie that the disease tells you, that life is over, your enjoyment is over, and that's not true. When I got clean in '89, when I first tried to get clean in '88, we didn't, you know, once my old man went to prison in '84, and you know, the New Year's Eve, the mob New Year's Eve parties sort of petered out in the '80s, like they were gone. You know what I mean? Like Tony Lee was on his own. My father was in prison doing 40 years, you know, and John wasn't having no big New Year's Eve parties, you know, and Tony Lee wasn't having no big New Year's Eve parties. And the crew, a lot of guys got straightened out. So the crew from the 70s had their own crews, guys from the, so it was just a different atmosphere. So the parties were over. The parties we used to have were over. So, you know, we just stood home on those holidays or went to visit each other in our houses. We didn't go out. But when I got clean, I went to, and I was in a fellowship, 12-step program. You know, we would have our own parties. We would have big parties. It was great, a great time and stuff. We used to, you know, have parties where there was no alcohol and no drugs. You know, just everything was the same and just no chemicals. But in the beginning, you have to get you have to get used to it. It's uncomfortable in the beginning to be in that kind of atmosphere clean. Like when I first got clean, there was a sober club called the Firehouse. It was out in Long Island. These firemen owned a club that were in AA. They were AA members. They owned the club out in Long Island. And once a week, they had it for no alcohol. They served no alcohol. It was just open for, it was open for people that were in recovery. And a lot of people from NA and a lot of people from AA used to go, and it was packed. It was packed. Music, it was a club, just with no alcohol. My friend Stevie, who was my sponsor at the time, I was only clean a couple of weeks, maybe a month or so. He took me there. Now, this is the first time I went into that atmosphere without, you know, drinking or whatever, snorting coke. So I go to this club and it's packed and the music's pumping and there's girls all over. It's a club, but nobody, and I'm standing up against the wall and I'm like, you know, and Stevie looks at me and goes, "What's the matter?" I go, I didn't know what to do. I said, "What do you do? How do you pick up girls? You know, you go to a bar, you try to give her a drink, give him a drink, you know, I'm there. I didn't know what to do. What do you do? Offer somebody a Coca-Cola?" Like I was like a fish out of water. You know, and then, you know, you get, you know, you just don't use and you go back and then, you know, then after a while, you know, you fit in, you know, but in the first time I went, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know even how to talk to anybody. You know, you're in a club and you see a pretty girl, send her a drink or send them a bottle of wine or whatever. Now you're in a sober club. What do? Tell her, give that girl a Coca-Cola? So, you know, you got to just not use and just go through the, you know, act as if until it kicks in.
Was your ratio higher when you were sending them drinks or when you were sober at closing?
My ratio, well, I don't know. It was probably higher, maybe a little higher when I was sending them drinks, but it was still good when I was sober, when I was clean, because once I got some time, like I still went to clubs. I was still mobbed up, so I had to go out. I had to earn a living. So I would still go once a week. I would go to Scores with Ronnie Cigars. We would straighten out with our sports customers on Thursday nights. So we would go to Scores in Manhattan, which was a strip club. I started dating one of the cocktail waitresses in there. So I always was okay with women. I never had an issue, with the ladies. I never had an issue with the ladies, whether I was using or not using.
How important is it for someone new in recovery to get comfortable being uncomfortable, like you mentioned?
Oh, it's very important because that's a trigger. New Year's Eve, like the first time I relapsed was on the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. I had no business going out that night. I was clean 6 months and I'm home, and it's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I know it's a big party night. I talked myself into going to the Lemon Tree. It was a club on Austin Street in Forest Hills. And I talked myself into going to the Lemon Tree, and I met, Danielle in there, and Danielle had and I was out the door. You know what I mean? So now if I would have listened to the program, People, Places, and Things, and I would have stood in my house, that would have never happened.
And then just to talk about that recovery, how'd you handle that?
How did I handle what? Using that night?
Yeah, and then get back on.
Well, because I really didn't want to. I only used that night, and then the next day, I didn't go on no run or nothing. And I went right back to the meetings, and I told my sponsor that I used, and I read some literature, and then and the same thing happened again. 3 months later, I was with another female, and I picked up again, People, Places, and Things, and I went back the same day, the next day, and I did that again. The third time, which was the last time, I went with another female to Manhattan to a concert. And then after the concert, she wanted to go to a club where I knew there was friends of mine there. It was a club that was hard to get in, but I could get in. And I went there, and I'm sitting at a table, and everybody's drinking, and and I knew everybody had a package on. And I took her home. I went to the hotel with her, did what I had to do, and then I took her home, and now I'm lit up. I went and got a package and went back to the hotel room by myself. And that's what the disease does. And then I'm sitting there a day and a half later, whatever, and I'm right back where I left off. I don't want to be there anymore. And that was it. That was, that was January 12th, 1989. I haven't, that was the end of it. I was, and that was it. I was done.
That's what, going on 37 years?
36 years. So in the beginning, you gotta, People, Places, and Things are the three biggest triggers in the world. I mean, you gotta always, in the beginning, you always gotta, plan ahead. You always gotta plan ahead. In the beginning, you always gotta plan ahead. Have phone numbers. Well, back then, now you got cell phones, you just program a number. Back then, you always had to have phone numbers in your pocket. If you went to a wedding or a party, always go in your own car, always have a way to get out of there, or have money to call a cab. You always got to make preparations to save yourself in the beginning. Holidays in prisons are different. State prisons are very different than federal prisons. State prisons are prison for me, the holidays were the worst times because everything slowed down on the holidays. Between Christmas and New Year's, time stopped. The movement stopped, the extracurricular activities stopped because the staff, the civilians that worked there would go on vacation. So the prison would slow down because they were understaffed. So they would close, like I used to go, but the state and the state did nothing for you. on holidays. They did absolutely nothing. They didn't decorate. They didn't have a special meal. They did absolutely nothing. For you, the state, in the penitentiary, you were locked in your cell. When I was in the penitentiary, when I was in a state medium, we would celebrate on our own because in the state you could get packages from home. So our families would send us festive meals, like on Christmas, they'd send us meals and cakes and pies, and New Year's Eve we would get special packages. So we ate good on our own, just us. That doesn't mean all the inmates ate good. We had it good. The mob guys had it good because our families looked out for us. So we have in the state, we had good meals on the holidays, but the penitentiary did nothing for you. And time slowed down. You know, you missed your family. There was less activities inside the prison. In the feds, they had more curricular activities. So like in the educational building in the feds, they had little TVs where they had VHS tapes, movies. And I used to go in there during the day and I would get a pair of headphones and I would get a movie. You know, they were all biblical movies and, you know, educational movies, but they were good, like The Robe, Samson and Delilah, you know, like good movies with great actors, Victor Mature, you know, and I enjoyed those movies. So I would go in there and I would throw a movie in and I would listen to it watch it on the TV, you know, and I used to bang out my days like that. But when the holidays came, everything shut down. But the feds, they made it festive. They decorated, they put trees up. I just put a picture of on my Instagram, on my social media, of us in federal prison with our Christmas tree that was in our, you know, on our unit. You know, we took pictures. They would come around and take pictures. We would send them home to our families. The feds were more festive on holidays, but time still slowed down for me. They would make a big meal. They would have tournaments in the yard. They would have a band out there playing, even though it was freezing, you know, you know. But they would have activities, you know, pinochle competitions, and you know, all kinds of stuff like that. So you know, it was what you made of. You know, when we would all hang out, we had cooks. We would have guys in the bakery, in the kitchen, make us special cakes. We would swag special foods out of the kitchen, and we cook our own meals. You know, we did our best. All right, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I want to especially thank all the Patreon members for, you know, the support they gave me all through the year. I'm looking forward to 2025. A lot of exciting things coming up. So you know, stay plugged in. And if you like my content, everybody else, please hit the subscribe button, ring the bell. Check out my Patreon for those that aren't members. There's a lot of good stuff. Memberships start at $1. For $1, see what's available. Maybe you'll like it, and you'll move on to a higher membership. Also, check out my merch. A lot of nice stuff on there. So everybody have a let's look forward to 2025.